Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Not D&D, which is brought to you by EM World Live, part of EM World, the leading tabletop news and review site. As always, I'm your host, Jessica, and joining me this week is Ryan. Ryan, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on here today.
Absolutely. So I was scrolling on TikTok, spending too much time on there, as I do. And so Ryan is a creator on TikTok, and I think it's the Outrider Creative on TikTok. That's right.
Yep.
And I saw this awesome game you're talking about, your game that you're going to be coming out, which is Perils and Princesses. And I was instantly drawn in because I was like, yes, I love both of these things. And so I asked Ryan to come on, and they've kindly come on to come and talk to us about the game. So that'll be the main thrust of what we're talking about this week. Anything we're talking about, well, I'll put links in the chat if you're watching live, and in the podcast show notes if you're listening afterwards. But if you're watching live, you can put questions in the chat, and we'll try and answer if we know the answers to them. And preferably if they could be about tabletop role-playing games, that would be super helpful. So Ryan, before we jump into talking about Perils and Princesses, I'd love to talk a little bit more about you and your background with games, as I always do with guests that come on the show. So the question I normally start with is, what is your first memory of playing role-playing games? Or do you remember the first TTRPG you played?
Yeah, I do. I got started playing with a group of friends, and one of my friends convinced his older brother to run a game for us. And
Nice.
I always get the feeling that he didn't put his all into his little brother's campaign, but we really wanted to run Ninja Turtles.
Of course,
so,
yeah.
Good
choice.
Yeah, and we had the book and we wanted him to run it, but he was like, "No, I'm just going to use, my kind of bare bones homebrew system, and yeah, sure, you can be Ninja Turtles." But I mean, we had such a good time. Yeah, it was super silly, super fun. Yeah, we didn't play a whole lot, but man, just thinking about those worlds and what all the potential there really got me excited about that kind of stuff.
Amazing. So did you say it was a bare bones homebrew kind of system the older brother used, was it?
Oh yeah. I mean, he was just writing his stuff up on sheets. I know he probably was more involved with his friends, but yeah, he would just kind of made a lot of stuff up as he went for us. So so that's kind of how I learned to play, right? Is like way more simple than maybe where D&D has gone.
Fair enough. That makes perfect sense. So what other systems did you start exploring and playing as when you moved beyond wanting to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? Or maybe you still do. Maybe you still do. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so I had like a big gap in my years playing a lot of games. The past 10 years or so, I was more exploring art and design and all this other stuff. And then with the pandemic, I had, with the pandemic, and then with my kids getting a little bit older, I kind of found a lot of comfort in those old kind of more lonely games and lonely pastimes and things that weren't quite as involving big groups of people, like putting together large art shows and that kind of thing that I was doing. I rediscovered what it was like to have that kind of fantasy world in your head and that sort of thing. So I kind of got back into it the past few years, got back into D&D 5e and was like, okay, what does this look like now? Found a lot of kind of the OSR and NSR games, and I was like, this has been going on the whole time while I was gone. This is awesome. I got onto TikTok and discovered all these cool things like Cairn and Into the Odd, and a lot of these systems that were simple, like how I learned after, and I was coming back to it, was just kind of shocked to see everything that was out there and just dove in headfirst.
Amazing. So that sounds really great. So you started playing games again, like more simple systems, and were you kind of playing games with your kids, or like kind of introducing them to games? Are they kind of an inspiration for you?
Oh, they're absolutely inspiration, and a main reason why I wanted to make my own game, because as I got back into the gaming world and found all these old school games, I loved how the rules were, but I didn't always love the world. And of course, there's like every
Mhm.
game for every world
Yeah.
that you could ever imagine. But I wanted to have I I saw how these simple rule sets and very kind of tactical, gritty, like common sense sort of stuff that you see in a lot of these kind of old school games,
Mhm.
how that makes sense with kids.
Yeah.
And but maybe the world isn't always appropriate for them, or there's a different kind of story
Mhm.
that you can tell that also really works in that space. um
That kind of maybe segues us into Perils and Princesses, because you mentioned on the website for it, the inspirations, your daughter Alice and your son Frank are like were really big inspirations for making this game. But one thing I do want to say before we move on is how pretty the game is, which also really drew me in. I love the art style, and you mentioned before you're an illustrator and you're a graphic designer, and I think that really shows that that's your kind of profession that's led into this, because it's a really beautiful looking book.
Thank you so much. I mean, that the art is where it started. I as someone who is new to this space or returning to this space, I wasn't going to sit around and be like, raise my hand like, hey, can I draw pictures for your book? I
Hmm.
wanted to draw my own, and I wanted to um and that that's kind of how it started. I was thinking about watching these princess movies and telling all these some classic kind of low fantasy adventure stories to my kids, and thinking
Hmm.
about that's the world I want to play in, and that's the world I
Hmm.
want to play in with them or with other people. And then I just started illustrating, started thinking about how this world would work. um, I was really inspired by my daughter Alice, who would throw on like a
Hmm.
purple princess dress and then hit her big brother with a sword.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Siblings, man. Yeah.
yeah, and then
Amazing.
and then and then playing with my playing
Hmm.
um, games with my oldest Frank, he's 11 now, but we started playing the past few years. And a lot of how he I'd had him DM a game for me, um, and I was
Awesome.
just taking his ideas of how simple and
Hmm.
um, he would run his stuff.
Hmm.
Like we like that's kind of how, for instance, that's how monsters work in Perils and Princesses. Is kind
Hmm.
of based on how he did. He's like, okay, we got like this is all I'm keeping track of here, and I just make up something new for them to do every turn. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like his
Yeah.
yeah. So I drew a lot from them and the world I wanted to play in with them, and kind of build it out.
Fantastic. 11's a really fun age. My nephew's just turning 11, and he is going to host his first games nights with his friends, and he's so excited because I kind of
Wonderful.
run Hero Quest for him and his friends. So that's like a really, really like simple intro to it. And he's like, I'm going to
Right.
have my friends over and I'm going to run it for them. And I was like, amazing. So I love seeing tiny GMs forming, which is fantastic. We've had a question come in, which I'll put up on the screen. So it's about the art style while we're talking about it. How has the art influenced the game's rules and kind of vice versa? How did the art, because you said it started there, how did that lead you into the rest of the game?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I would say um, the the art is about the idea of gaming, and in a lot of
Mhm.
ways it's this combination of, like, it combines a lot of different styles into one, where you've got some stuff pulled right from more medieval kind of uh, public domain pieces, and some like references to kind of the mid-century Disney animated movies and how they interpreted the medieval stuff. And then on top of
Mhm.
that, it has um, stuff that's very like in a sketchy, almost childlike style. Um,
Mhm.
so what I really wanted to do is trace that history of how these kind of fantasy worlds are built, where it starts with the source material and then has the history of how people have recreated it, and then as you bring it to life on the table, how are you imagining it? So there's these layers of kind of the source material, and then nostalgic bits and pieces, and then I always tried to make it really raw and sketch like, almost like this is how um, these princesses are coming to life in the mind of someone who's young, or you know a, a young adventurer going and facing the world. So um, more so the world and setting, I think, was influenced by the art style than the
Yeah.
rules itself, I think.
Okay, well, let's talk about that then. Tell me about the world and the setting. So, what world are we going to be walking in Perils and Princesses?
Yeah, so the crux of it kind of started when I was looking at all these kind of dungeon crawling games
Hmm.
while watching, animated Disney movies, and thinking about how, man, those like there's really cool features of these Disney princesses, and
Hmm.
how they, if they can call upon woodland animals, that's sort of like a um that's, I guess, like in something like D&D, right? That's like a kind of a common power, like if a druid can
Hmm.
do this, like all this stuff. But if that was like the crux of your power, these simple things, or singing an enchanted
Hmm.
song, or having this like tender heart and tender friendship, and that gets you through. I was like, if
Hmm.
that's the crux of how you adventure, um, that that can just be like an interesting world. And then from
Hmm.
there, I think, beyond Disney, I think the princess story, or this kind of like fairy tale adventure, is something that's really interesting. So thinking about books like, The Farthest Away Mountain is one I keep coming back to. That was one of my
Hmm.
favorites as a kid, where you've got, um, this girl who goes on an adventure, and the little things she brings along the way end up making a big impact later. Um, yeah, so that kind of like humble adventure story, where you're not keeping track of, these great powers that are scaling bigger. They're just like scaling in terms of, um, being like interesting things you can do, and that kind of thing.
Fantastic. And you mentioned kind of it's designed to be like a simple rules light kind of system. So it's great for perhaps younger people or people that are new to role playing games, or somebody that's just wants something light to play. Because I know we play something with real crunch, and that's great. But sometimes you're like, I just need a nice palate cleanser game to just run for my friends. So what is the kind of basic core mechanic? How do we play the game?
Yeah. So the rules from this are kind of, pieced together from a lot of other like common mechanics you see around. It is a three stat, roll under, or you roll your
Hmm.
stat or under. Now, some of those systems are a little bit more deadly in terms of, you just roll your damage dice right off the bat. But
Uh-huh.
this is more like if you took the black hack and just cut the stats in half, where you're still rolling to hit and rolling to
Hmm.
defend yourself, like that system.
Hmm.
Um, but there's only three stats, more like, into the odd or something like that, where,
Hmm.
um, and the stats are meant to be like, they're princessy, right? You've got resolve, which is your kind of strength and con mix, and then you've got
Hmm.
grace, which is social grace, as well as your like physical gracefulness.
Hmm.
And then wits is like anything mental or emotional.
Hmm. Fantastic. So you have your three kind of base attributes.
Yep.
And one thing I saw, which I really liked, was most characters will have a fairy godmother as well. Can you talk about how that works?
Yeah. So the fairy godmother idea is, princess in the realm of this game. It's sort of a shortcut term, right? It doesn't need to
Hmm.
be a literal princess.
Hmm.
Um, I always like to say that Luke Skywalker is a Disney princess, because,
Hmm.
his fairy godmother is Obi-Wan, and he only succeeds when he
Yeah.
trusts his feelings, right? And he gets a magic sword from his father, and like all of it's like princess and fairy tale stuff. Um, so when I was thinking about what's going to tie all these together, they're not all going to be literal princesses, or
Hmm.
they absolutely can and should be if you want that.
But they
Um,
don't have to be.
but they don't have to
Yeah.
be. But the thing they
Yeah.
do need is a fairy godmother. They need this
Hmm.
like sort of, supernatural form, whatever it takes. And I've got like a
Hmm.
random list of whether your fairy godmother is a cute, sparkly old lady, or whether she's an old crone, or just nature, or ancestors, or
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And that's kind of what determines, in lieu of classes in this game,
Hmm.
your fairy godmother gives you a gift, and your
Hmm.
gift is like some kind of, whether it's powerful friendship or an enchanting voice. That's kind of your what determines how you play the game, and that's what levels up as you progress.
And that's the cool special ability you were talking about earlier that all the characters kind of have. Like, yeah,
Right, right.
fantastic. And as you mentioned, items, and like things you take with you on the way and the journey being important as well. Could you talk a little bit about like relics and wondrous items and what they're like in the game?
Yeah, so I wanted to make, make the stuff you have important and make that like really set the scene. So, and that's where a lot of the fairy tale stuff comes into play. And I had so much fun just like, you know, reading books and thinking about little things and how they would, you know, whether it's, you know, poison apples and some of the like classic role-playing game items that I think make sense in this world. So there's like that little bit of crossover, like, you know, I've got, you know, a rope of climbing is kind of a standard D&D item, but in this world that would make a huge difference that would be a very powerful magic item to be able to have a rope that would help you automatically climb anything. And then as the game is now, it's pretty low magic, but so there's not like and so there's a list of like 20 spells that exist in the game. And, you know, hopefully people end up writing more, but the magic is in the form of these relics, right? And they kind of have charges that you spend, and then they recharge, always in an interesting, weird way. Not, you know, whether you're, you know, burying it underground or getting it, you know, asking a fairy to recharge it or something where the game world matters and what you do matters.
Yeah. What's one of your favorite wondrous items in the game?
Oh, that's a good question.
One that comes to mind now, anyway. Not to put too much pressure on the question.
Yeah, I think people always laugh because there's now I can't even think of it, but there's superb glue is one of my favorites, and that's like the glue that holds anything forever. You know, and there's the classic like pixie dust, of course, you would need in this game, and again, that would be a hugely powerful thing to have some pixie dust and be able to fly in a situation where you're, you know, kind of limited in terms of the magic that you can cast at will.
Awesome. They sound very cool. I'm excited to walk through and have a look at all of them. Okay, so we kind of talked about, you know, the kind of the world we're in, the kind of basic core mechanics and the characters you're playing. So it's going to be like, say, we say the word princess, but you don't have to be a literal princess. The gender doesn't matter. The thing that will bind you is this fairy godmother, the sponsor that will give you your gift and you know, enable you to go kind of on your journey. So how, when you were writing the book, how did you go about, someone's asked a question, to paraphrase this question, how did you go about, you know, structuring the book and you know, teaching the rules to somebody via the book? Because obviously we can talk about this now and I can ask you loads of questions, but somebody that gets the book will just pick it up and go from there. And were there any discoveries you made during the book design kind of process?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, so a lot of times I did this in a way that they wouldn't you normally wouldn't recommend this to someone, to do the layout of the book, the illustrations of the book, and the writing of the book all in tandem. And that's how I did it from the get-go. I was designing pages all at once, which is not an efficient way to do it at all. But I think especially with games like this, where there's a whole book, or even games where there's cards, like a Magic the Gathering type game, the form is the function of it so much, and the illustrations, at least for me when I was young playing games, and to bring up Magic again, like seeing I have a very like vivid memories of opening my first pack of Magic the Gathering cards and seeing these illustrations and seeing these icons and seeing these little blips, and you discover this whole world not by reading just text. It's like you found an old scrapbook, and you're looking at all these photos, and you can kind of, I mean, now it's grown so big, and there's so much online stuff about lore or whatever. But at the time, you know, in the 90s, when I opened these, it's like, what is this game? What are these little, you know, what is this whole world I'm seeing? And I want to discover more and learn more about it. So for me, writing Perils and Princesses, it was like, I need to see the layout as I do it, because the layout is going to determine how I'm going to present this game. Like showing the illustration, it's not just pretty pictures to fill spaces. It's like the illustration and the text and the layout and the typography is going to get you there all together. It's all going to, you know, it's going to all help put you in the game world and get you excited about playing the game and get you, and make it make sense. So I'm all about that kind of designing the information all as one, even though it's not efficient. And if, obviously you would need like a tight knit team if this was a bigger operation. But for me, as I'm doing this, I'm just,
yeah. Yeah, the benefit of it being you doing everything. Obviously, the bad is it's a lot of work, but the benefit is you do have that control and you can spend that time doing it. Absolutely. Right. So yeah, it looks absolutely great. When one thing, the page, because I brought up this page. If you're watching live, you can see it's got like a dragon, and we've got kind of the layout of the different monsters and the stats and kind of how that works. So could you talk to us about the bestiary and all the monsters or the NPCs that we will encounter?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I wanted to, again, this was a big way to set, create the world as the monsters that you're going to put in it. And I wanted to have a mix of some very classic, first of all, range of levels of kind of run-of-the-mill monsters and more epic legendary ones that you can maybe someday, if your party can face a big dragon or something like that. And then, the monsters themselves, I wanted to be kind of these fairy tale nightmares and that kind of thing. If you've ever read the J.R.R. Tolkien poem, The Mulips, that was a big.
That was the inspiration. Yeah,
that was the inspiration for a lot of how the bad guys are in this. They're they don't, they're not. And you'll see that in the illustration style. They're very rough and like almost like visceral childlike scribbles for what this monster is. It's that unknown. It's that the princess, in a lot of fairy tales, you've got the princess who goes into the forest, and the forest is this space where your adventurer kind of hits a lot of the unknown and then grows and then learn something, and the forest is what tests you, and it's these unknown horrors that are there, and that's kind of, that's how dungeons work in old school D&D. You leave our normal world, and then you delve into the dungeon where everything, where the world's out to get you. So that's the monsters I put in there. Were kind of this spooky, unknown, kind of uncanny horrors is what. But at the same time, they're rendered in pink, right? They're like, they are.
Yes.
It's a fairy tale world.
Yeah, I mean, the dragon in the picture I'm seeing still does look very scary, even though it's on a pretty dusty pink background. So it's a very real danger. So when if we were to sit down and play a game, what sort of story or adventure would we be going on? Like, did you have like guidance in the book for how to run it, or are there like scenarios you can play through, or how would we sit down at the table?
So I'm the last bit I'm trying to add to the end of this book is going to be like an intro dungeon and an intro little world, because at first I wasn't going to. I was like, I'm not going to bother with that, but being a game that I hope that people who may have never played before pick up, I want to make sure that's in there. As it stands right now, this intro adventure is, of course, has to start with Once Upon a Time, and I kind of recommend, like, when you start off, you have to start off with Once Upon a Time. There was a princess who was betrayed, and her magic crown was stolen, and she could no longer protect her city. And now, centuries later, these group of princesses are going to try to find that lost crown to help save their city. Right? Classic, simple stuff.
Yeah.
And then they have to go off into the forest and through the forest and find the hidden tomb and delve in and see what horrors are there to find, and use their resolve, use their grace, use their magic, magic potions they got from their godmother to help find, face whatever kind of perils are in the forest and underground.
Fantastic. And I was just thinking, because obviously you said it was so inspired by, kind of your children, and it's an accessible rules light game that different people can play. And one thing I know is when I play games with children in groups, especially little girls, actually, not to be too specific, but either they are the biggest group of murder hobos you've ever met and will attack everything, or they just are the most peaceful liberators, and you will put a situation in front of them like this big evil monster that you thought they were going to have to kill, and then they find some peaceful resolution that you never ever thought of. And one thing I looked at in the games, it seems like there's lots of different ways to approach a challenge beyond just combat. Is that, would that be right?
100%. And it's made to be, it's made to be open-ended. And I talk about that in sort of like the upfront, all the challenges they shouldn't have one simple solution. They should have, and the powers, like you said, and your abilities from your gift are meant to, some of them are kill them with kindness kind of things. Some of them are, very protective kind of things, or very charming or enchanting kind of things. Because playtesting this, sometimes you'll get someone who's like, we need to, like you said, it can go either way. And sometimes the best is when you have multiple people in the group that want to do different things. That always is interesting too.
A discussion, yes.
Yeah, but I've played a game with my group where there was a whole bunch of spiders in the forest, and they ended up doing a spooky spider chorus line dance because she rolled really well on her enchanted voice showstopper ability, and they were able to distract them with a with a song and a dance, and then set their webs ablaze as they ran away. It was great.
Amazing. Wow. What a solution. It's like a real Guardians of the Galaxy kind of moment.
For sure.
Fantastic. So where's the stage of games at now? Because we kind of alluded to. So this game is going to be coming to Kickstarter soon. Is that correct?
Yes. Right now, I'm set to start it on July the 25th, which is a Tuesday in a couple weeks.
Oh wow! Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna do. I have to stop noodling and just do it and get it out into the world. So yeah, if you're interested and you follow along, hit on that Kickstarter page, that would be huge, just to get notified right when I push the go live button.
Absolutely. So the links to that are in the chat if you're watching live, or if you're listening to the podcast, the link is in the show notes. So you can look at that on Kickstarter there. So this is your first game that you're bringing to Kickstarter. So I'm sure it's in the very exciting stage where you're getting everything ready, getting ready to launch, but you've got your page kind of made up, you've sent it to Kickstarter, it's been approved. Do you have any kind of, at this stage, advice for other people? So maybe there's people here that have an idea for their game and they're thinking about going the crowdfunding route like you have. Do you have any pearls of wisdom to share at this point with people?
I mean, maybe ask me once it's over, but
yeah.
At this point, I would say, use what I've come to find out, talking to people who have done this before and that are better at it than me, and like kind of giving it a go, is that Kickstarter is just such a good tool to build hype. It's a good tool to kind of get yourself going and make something real. My biggest advice would just be keep it simple. I know I have to keep telling myself that, like, you have all these ideas, and when you get excited about your project, and I wanted to, like, oh, maybe I can get miniatures and GM screens and all these awards, and custom pink shiny dice and all these awards and stuff, and I'm gonna forego a lot of that just so at least for the first round, maybe when advanced Perils and Princesses comes out in 5 years or something, then I can do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would keep it simple and use it as a tool to get your word out and get a little bit of buzz going for yourself, and just don't overthink it if you can help it. I know that's hard.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and I would completely agree with that as well. I think it's so tempting to do like all this stuff and you get all the things, but especially if you're doing your first one, overstretching yourself with loads of different add-ons and options you see it slowing down so many Kickstarters, even they go really well. And I think sometimes just being like, hey, I've made this game, do you want it? Is kind of enough. Right. So that's definitely the approach we take at EM Publishing with our games as well. We very rarely ever do stretch goals, which always puzzles people, but it means we can deliver on time and get the thing out there for people to play, which is ultimately what we want. Fantastic. So one thing you did mention earlier as well. So you mentioned with the items that you had in the game. You said, "Oh, I hope more people make stuff for this." So I'm assuming that means you're open to third-party content creators using the system to make their own stuff later.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's things that are in here that I made up, but this is like a long history of people that have been doing this way longer and way better than me, that I'm use their mechanics and kind of use the raw material that was already out there and kind of mushed it into the world that I wanted to build. But like the only thing I don't want people to do is take my drawings and use them without my permission. That's it. So
that's more than fair.
Everything else is I didn't these fairy tale ideas are as old as people have been telling stories. So
tale as old as time.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry.
Yeah, take the game and have fun with it. I just don't. Yeah.
That's fair enough. I think more details on that in depth are on perilsandprincesses.com. So if you are interested in looking at that and making some stuff and all things, you can check out there and make sure you don't steal anyone's artwork as well, because that's generally a bad vibe to do. Amazing. So is there anything else you want us to talk about with the game? So we've kind of gone through the world, the basic mechanics, the kind of characters, the things you're going to explore, the monsters, the Kickstarter's coming out soon in the link. Is there anything else that I've forgotten to ask you, or any kind of closing words you want to share about the game?
Let's see. I mean, I think we covered a lot of it, and there's a lot there. I mean, I could ramble on and on about my game. But yeah, I think a lot of people are. A really fun bit is character creation. I think I put a lot into the character creation bit. There's a lot of random tables for what the stuff you have, and your weapons are all very flavorful. And the illustrations, again, kind of take you there and put you in that character right away. So yeah, I think there's a quick start I have on itch right now. Okay. If you're interested in like even just building a character, seeing what the rules are like. And then that's already pretty hefty, but then the rest of the book has way more monsters, way more magic, way more kind of fun ways to populate your fairy tale land.
Fantastic. And the link to that quick start edition is in the show notes or on screen if you're watching live. So fab. Amazing. Well, I do have one last question for you, Ryan, before I let you go, and work on your Kickstarter campaign that you're probably frantically doing over the next 2 weeks, tweaking and editing, because I know that's what I do when I have a Kickstarter out. And the question is, do you have any other TTRPGs that you would like to shout out or recommend while you're here?
The one that comes to mind, which was a huge influence on how I thought about making Perils and Princesses, is the Glog. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Glog. It's the Goblin Laws of Gaming. It's goblinpunch.blogspot.com. And it's just a really cool way to think about games and think about using modular rules and pulling them all together. And the way the Glog handles all kinds of stuff is just super interesting and a really easy way to like really, really play a cool old school kind of game.
Fantastic. That sounds really good. Thank you for that recommendation. Well, Ryan, wish you the best of luck with your Kickstarter. I'll be following it, so looking forward to seeing the progress on it. And if you've been watching and it sounds of interest to you, please do go check it out and follow and back the Kickstarter, because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. But with that, thank you to everyone that watched. Thank you for coming on. And we'll be back next week with Not D&D with another episode, another indie tabletop RPG to introduce you to. So hopefully see you next week. Thanks very much. Bye.